ahead and kick off the work session. I will let Miles run through consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. For the consent agenda, you have 15 items. The first item is the special meeting minutes from August the 7th. The second item is the council workshop meeting minutes from August the 21st. For item number 3 is approval of regular meeting minutes from September 5th. Item number 4 is approval of the Watershed Review Board meeting minutes from October 2nd. Item number 5 is the approval of the regular meeting minutes from October the 2nd. Item number 6 is approval of the closed session meeting minutes from October the 2nd. You should have a copy of those at your desk, different color sheet of paper. So Jamie will collect those at the end of the meeting. Item number 7 is approval of City Council workshop meeting minutes from October the 16th. And I think those are the meeting minutes. Yes. Item number 8 is the acceptance of a street in the TKC Double Oak development. And it's a street for acceptance. It's the Oaks Parkway. It's about 300 linear feet. The street, curbing, storm drainage have all been inspected by city staff and have found to be in compliance with city standards. Item number 9 is consideration of a request from Gaston Natural Resources Department to execute an interlocal agreement for processing and permitting of erosion control facilities. The first one is sedimentation erosion control ordinance. You have that ordinance included in the packet. And this is currently updating, the county's currently updating all of their interlocal agreements, and so this will renew annually without any action by council in the future. Item number 10 is similar request from Gaston County Natural Resources to update the city's current agreement for the processing and permitting of stormwater facilities in accordance with the county's stormwater MS4 permitting ordinance is included. And in similar fashion, this existing agreement will automatically renew annually without action by the council after this adoption. Item number 11 is the adoption of a resolution accepting a North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program grant. And this is, we're in year 4 of 5 for this grant. And if you recall, this is for the DUI enforcement officer. And there's the table listed shows the percentage due to the feds from year 1 through 5.
4. I think it's 5. We're 100% responsible.
1 through 4, correct. Thank you. Item number 12 is the consideration of approval of a resolution requesting a truck route by weight designation along portions of North Carolina 7. And this is a request from the town of McAdenville for Belmont support of a resolution to have NCDOT consider designating the truck route along Highway 7. The goal of the resolution is to divert the anticipated transfer truck associated with the Oaks Commerce expansion on Beaver Grove Road around McAdenville's downtown. So inside your council packet, that you can see that the resolution, and there's also a couple maps that are included for consideration. Item number 13 is the authorization to proceed with the survey of properties on Deaton Drive. And the last item, number 14, second to last item, number 14, is a budget amendment that includes several items that we discussed over the past several months. $52,000 for infield dirt at Rodden, Crescent, Reed, and Belmont Central ball fields. $7,800 for portable fences for baseball fields. $2,000 for the skate park signage. You all received a rendering from that sign 2 weeks ago in your council update. $3,200 for a bronze plaque for the exterior entrance of the city rec facility, And then the $1,200 is for the survey that I just discussed on item number 13. And item number 15 is to consider to update the policy outlining the City Council Citizen Advisory Board appointment process. So there's an actual policy written that needs to be adopted this time. Turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Any questions on any of the consent agenda items?
I have a couple. With respect to the budget amendment, item 14, $52,000 for the dirt infield, so that went up. I thought we talked about $48,000 at our last meeting or workshop.
Correct. It was $48,000 at the last workshop, and I think $7,500 for the actual portable fence. But once the estimates came around, they were actually just a little bit more. So that's why it was different from the last time we saw that.
And with respect to the interlocal agreements, with the stormwater agreement, do I correctly understand this agreement applies only to areas that are outside the city's watershed ordinance?
Very good question. This is for Jerry. If you can step to the microphone.
Yeah, that's correct. If you recall the watershed map that we adopted, the revisions last time, it showed a big yellow area on the side. That's the area where the
Towards
county,
the, yeah.
where the county would take care of it.
Okay, and we take care of the, or who takes care of the portion that's in the city
We
watershed?
take care of that.
Okay. My only other question or concern of both agreements, the erosion and sediment control and stormwater agreement, if you look in section 3A, one of the things that we are not, or the county is not responsible for, and we are, is any conditional zoning that requires conditions outside the scope of the ordinance or agreement. And I feel like we had some discussions about that with the Del Webb, and we might have some discussions going forward, but it seems as though anything, if we want to impose conditions beyond what the county requires, then we have to enforce them, and we'd be responsible for that on our own.
That's correct.
All right. Well,
And for the record, the county doesn't require very much.
yes, and that was part of the problem. Yeah.
On that case-by-case basis, when that occurs, that we will have to discuss that because we think that there will be a cost associated with those inspections in the future if it's above and beyond what the county is requiring, just because of our staff load, and the expertise required for that. So at that point, we'll have to look at it and come back with a proposal to actually enforce those conditions.
Okay. Because that's just, when I read that, we had a lot of back and forth about that, and I just anticipate, based on, what's on the horizon, that might be a source of frustration again, to the extent that we want to go beyond what the county requires with future proposals.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, well, that will do it for the work session. So I will now call us to order. Jim, would you mind leading the invocation?
Let us bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for all the blessings you've bestowed in our community. We thank you for the blessings of democracy and the peaceful transition of power as our residents go to the polls tomorrow and vote. We pray for all the candidates who are up for election this year, that they've reached the end of their journey and that they find peace and relief no matter what happens tomorrow. And we thank you for, again, the blessings that you've bestowed on this community, and ask that you guide those entrusted with civic responsibility to lead us forward to further blessings and progress. And we ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me for the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, independent,
So we do have one recognition to make tonight. I believe Representative Loftus is in the front. There you are. Okay. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I am Donnie Loftus, the North Carolina representative for District 109, which includes Belmont, Cramerton, and most of Gaston. I've been in this position since November of 21, and in last year's budget, $3.5 million, I think, was appropriated for the rec center that looks beautiful at night. I'm here tonight to present a check for $11 million. 10 of that will go to water and sewer, and $1 million of that was for the trolley committee to go to work on. So I'm honored to be here. Gaston County has done really well this session from our delegation. It's not by just my efforts. I have Representative Torbett in the 108 District in Stanley, Representative Kelly Hastings, which is Western Gaston County, Cleveland, a little bit of Rutherfordton. And then we have Belmont's own Senator Brad Overcash and Senator Ted Alexander. So you'll be happy to know that for two greenhorns, myself and Senator Overcash, Gaston County was probably the #1 county in the budget this year, with close to $200 million coming back to support Gaston County. That's a pretty good start for our first year. So I look forward to continuing to serve and work with this council and this city to make Gaston County even better. Hopefully we can do greater things in the future. Some of the things that will still be important for us is water and sewer, which will include economic development for Belmont. Charlotte Mecklenburg is pushing this way. Along about February, March, and April, we will start our budget process, and I look forward to working with your city manager and identifying priorities so that we can make sure that we leverage what funding may be available for the state. So with that being said, if I may present this, and Mr. Mayor, if your council members would come with me, I could get Neil to take a picture for us. Not every day you get $11 million check. If you stand in the middle, I get on my cash.
You want to do it back here?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Don't go too far back.
You get up and come this way. Roll that wheelchair up here. Just make sure it's flat. Cool. Can we get everybody in it? Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Look at me.
Mind if you don't want to.
1, 2, 3.
Hang on. One more.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, come on.
Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you. I would just like to point out that I think since I became mayor, we've only had one meeting where someone has not brought us a check. So, just put that out there. All right,
I'll move second, Jim.
thank you.
Second.
All those in favor? All right. Motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So move. Second.
All those in favor? All right. Now we're going on to public comment. Dennis Boyce, first up.
My name is Dennis Boyce. I'm a resident of Pebble Creek neighborhood in North Belmont, 2025 Ark Street. And I just wanted to come by tonight quickly just to say thank you for the help with our trick-or-treating experience last week. We had, for about 30 years, had sort of an informal partnership with the city, and barricades would come, those kinds of things. And it's gotten a little more complicated, but city staff was so so nice to deal with. Jamie Campbell and Summer Gilbert and City Manager all took time. Martha, you were very helpful, and Richard, you were very helpful, and then Mr. Mayor, you stepped up and helped out with some money, and we just got through it. It was a good night, and I was concerned about our neighborhood being angry or feeling slighted, and I also want to make sure that the city didn't feel like that we were pursuing anything in an adversarial way, for my part at least, and we're not organized in any way, so I don't hold any office, but just as a neighbor over there, I very much appreciated the efforts of council and the staff, and just want to say thank you.
Next is Dot Martin. Dot Martin, you are up. Yeah.
You put us so far back in the corner, I didn't even hear you. My name is Dorothy Martin. My husband's Charlie Martin, the prior mayor. And I'm just here, you know, I had some other things I was gonna say, but I'm not going to. I'm just gonna leave it in the Lord's hands. But I hope and pray that this election turns out the way I hope it does. Because this is a very pivotal time in our city, and we really need some leadership, not control. And for the first time in my life, since Kennedy, I have not voted for a Democrat. But this time I'm going to vote for a Democrat and vote for Martha to be the mayor. Because I think Martha has done a lot more. She understands better, she understands business better, she's more educated, and I just think she'll do a great job, and so does my husband, and that's why we are voting for her. And I hope the rest of you will too. It's just been a pleasure working with you, Martha. And I know there's been some things said about my husband, that he's just a senile old man, but no, he's not. He's not. And I just pray that whatever this election turns out, instead of thinking of yourselves, that this election is going to be about this city and these people, and loving and caring for these people instead of making a name for yourself. Because this has been a real bad situation. And Belmont's better than this. I was born and raised here, and I've never been as ashamed of my city as I am right now. I always thought the people all around here were pretty much straight up, but I'm finding that that's not true. And I pray to God that this thing turns out right. However it turns out, I pray that you'll do the right job instead of doing things for yourselves. Because we really need this at this time in our country. We need to start locally and get ourselves together and get our acts together. That means everybody. Thank you. And my husband, he would speak too, but I'm saying the same thing he'd say. So, thank you.
Right. That is all we had for public comment. First item on the agenda is the Belmont ABC Board audit presentation.
Good evening. How are y'all?
Good.
My name is Brian Burns. I'm chairman of the Belmont ABC Board, and here's our manager, Bill Montgomery. So a couple things. Just want to first present our check for $101,274.78. That represents our fourth quarter distribution and our first quarter distribution. And if you remember last year, this time we gave you about $91,000. So it's about $10,000 higher than what we did last year this time. For our budget, we budgeted about flat like we did for 22 and 23. Right now, we're above where we were, or where we project to be. So we're exceeding what we had planned for the budget. So that is a good thing. And we're going into our busiest season, which is October, November, December. So we expect to have increased sales going forward as well. So I understand you all have received our audit. If you have any questions about the audit, I'm more than happy to answer them for you. But the audit came back great. I've never had an issue with our audit or our numbers or anything. Everything is pretty well where it needs to be in with regards to the state. So if there's anything else I can answer for you all, we're really looking forward to oh, one other thing. Our consultant is coming back to us at our next meeting to talk about locations or proposed locations for a future store. So.
And I'm assuming everything in the audit is consistent with moving forward, in
Yes.
terms of finances and everything with
Yes.
that proposal, should it make sense?
Yes.
And I would like to make a comment, not all of you were on the council when we started the ABC store. When we had our retreat, Cramerton and Gaston both came and said, we will be glad to run this for you and we will give you 30% of the profits. And so the person representing ABC board in Raleigh also told us it's really difficult to make money doing this kind of thing. And so I'm so glad that we made the choice and we had such an excellent board to put this together, because obviously we made the right choice in choosing you guys, and you have done a great job for us, and thank you.
You guys have given us the tools to be successful, and that's what's important. If you all remember, the state told us we wouldn't do more than $1 million in sales, and I think we'll do close to $6 million. That's our goal. So, and we outperform both Cramerton stores, our single store.
So maybe we should run their stores.
The only
Thank you.
You're welcome.
other, the audit was it for 2 fiscal years?
Just one.
Just one? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
We just incorporated the previous years
I see.
to see the trend.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is significant for those who haven't seen it, going from 21 into 22 and then flat into 23 is what it seems.
Yes.
But I'd be interested, once the consultant does their analysis, what the potential yield would be by the second location. Because it does seem we're kind of maxed there, but to your point, I think you made at a previous meeting, those folks are probably going to Cramerton and getting
Yes.
a lot of those liquor sales.
Yes.
So there's like an untapped market for us that we could really tap into.
Well, that's, we want to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar as well, and we want to maximize what it is that we can do for the town.
Yeah.
So we're looking at everything. So.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for what y'all do. This is
Well, we're here to do a job, and we take it seriously, and I think we all contribute very well and work all together and are one mind. So.
And one other comment too, just for the audience, because when we first looked at this, I don't think we on the council had a full understanding that the restaurants have to buy from our ABC stores. So
Yes.
until that time we started the ABC stores, the restaurants were buying from the other municipalities' ABC stores. So it's not that we necessarily individually are consuming that much alcohol at our restaurants.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And to that point, we have picked up a restaurant from Lowell, correct?
We had
Yeah, so
25.
Oh, wow.
We've picked up a restaurant just this week from outside of the city, so.
And tell Mr. Burns why that is, because
So they have the option, as a restaurateur, if they are not within a specific district, whether it's Gastonia or Belmont, or Cramerton, or Mount Holly, where they have to buy from that particular store, but if they're in like Lowell, they can choose where they want to buy. And we try to be proactive with Bill, our manager, and Kelly as assistant. We go out and we talk to the restaurants. We don't take it for granted we have their business. We want to show them that we appreciate their business. And I think that shows in how we treat our mixed beverage customers, and hopefully they appreciate that, and maybe that's what happened, how we ended up with the business from outside of Belmont coming to us and buying it.
Thank you.
there is some variance in pricing between stores, isn't there? I mean, is it,
No, it's all set by the state.
it's fixed at
It's
every
set by the
location?
state, so they allow
So
us
it's
to
purely
put.
service oriented, it's
Yes.
purely service. It's
Yes,
not on
well,
the-
actually, the mixed beverage people pay more. They have a higher tax. So, it's all about customer service as far as we're concerned.
Our inventory can vary a little bit by ABC, is that correct as well? So like, we would potentially carry something that maybe Cramerton
Sure.
would carry or something?
Sure,
like
and
that?
that's really at the discretion of
Okay.
the manager, what we carry, because I trust Bill's judgment as to how he runs the store.
I
And
think
what
we
he,
all do.
as how he, the trends, what he sees or thinks of the trends, and also we have board members. Tim Summers is in the industry, and he's always sending us stuff about industry trends, ready to drink, mixed drink, stuff like that. So, and that's the largest growing segment of the alcohol business right now is I won't say white claws, but the pre-made beverage that you can get and just take with you, already made. So.
Any questions for the ABC board?
Who wants to check tonight? Richard had wanted it last time. Miles? Yes, sir. Mark, you want it?
Sure.
All right. There you go.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much.
Keep getting money.
It's a trend is all I'm gonna say. All right.
That is awesome.
Next, we have a public hearing for the update to the pedestrian plan. So entertain a motion to go into public hearing.
So moved.
All those in favor? All right. It's my understanding there is no staff presentation? Or is
Well,
there?
there was a staff
Well, there was a staff presentation, we already saw it. But you can say whatever you need to.
I had one slide, but
Okay,
I don't
good.
have to present it.
No, you can do it. I'll give you 5 minutes.
I don't need that.
It's also Tiffany's birthday today.
Do you
Oh,
want
happy
me-
birthday.
Happy birthday.
Well, then you can show us how many slides.
Oh, I mean,
Birthday
it's my
slide.
birthday, so I appreciate a quick meeting, so.
Yeah.
There you go. Jamie, can you just advance to the next one?
You don't have to check, I don't think either.
I don't. I
Hey,
also.
Miles just got a really big one.
Okay, perfect. So the only thing I was going to share is, as you all may recall, the pedestrian plan update was presented October 16th at a special meeting with the planning board. And for the public's input, we just wanted to go over a brief overview with you of how we got to where we are today. So this project to update our pedestrian plan actually began back in February of 2022, where we started with the consultant on what it would take to get us to where we are today. We held 2 open houses, one back in April 2022, another one in the fall in October. And in between there, we held some public engagement events, did some plan review of our existing plan, got input from the communities. We also held 3 neighborhood meetings, one on the peninsula, one in North Belmont, and one in the Reed community to hear from our citizens. And then we took about a year from December 2022 to October 2023, working with the consultant at a really detailed level to look at revisions to the plan and recommendations, and then vetting those out, again, under the guidance of our steering committee. And that ultimately led to the draft plan that was presented on October 16th, where you all and planning board engaged in some dialogue and some suggestions on maybe some typos or some highlights, and so the consultant has made those minor amendments, but nothing to the actual content of what was presented on the 16th. And where we are tonight is to hold the required public hearing, and so that's what we're asking you to do today, and then after that, we'd be able to consider adoption of this important plan update for our city. That's it.
Any questions for staff?
Just thank you for all the work.
Yeah, thank you, there's a lot of work done into this, definitely appreciate it.
Perfect, and we wouldn't be able to staff do that without robust citizen participation and engagement, feedback from all of you, the steering committee, and all of our stakeholders. And so we are very, very thankful as a staff to have an engaged community to be able to work with. And we are really looking forward to continued community engagement as part of our upcoming long-range plans for a update our comprehensive land use plan and our multimodal network plan. So I'm hoping that this sets a great foundation, and the work is not done, so we are excited about continuing that effort.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is one person signed up for public comment, Amanda Wall. She,
I think I saw her leave.
okay, all right, well, we'll just leave it at that then. Motions would be.
Motion, wait, sorry.
We can come out of public.
Yeah, motion on that public hearing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, next item on the agenda is consider adoption of a resolution to adopt the 2023 pedestrian plan updates.
Motion to adopt as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Uh,
All right.
Cooking with gas.
Next item is the system development fee review.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and members of council. This is an informational item, the system development fee draft study that Wildan has performed was inside of your council packet. You can tell just the amount of information in there, that we wanted to get this to you before the actual public hearing, which will occur at the next council meeting. We have to have this, draft study on our website for 45 days. We're at the 42-day mark, I believe. Very close. Taking comments in, at this point, so, this is just an informational item. We have Daryl here from Wildan, the actual consultant that went through the study. We also have Shannon with Withers Ravenel, who works on the engineering CIP information that included. So I'll turn it over to Daryl.
All right, thank you. Who will control the presentation? Well, didn't do it. All right.
Make sure it works.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Daryl Parker with Wildan Financial Services, and we are working with Shannon and Withers Ravenel to do the system development fee study. This is a once every 5-year thing, as you'll see in the presentation, and it's just that time, and it was ready to be updated. So we've, and by the way, I don't have a check either.
You can leave.
All right. And you got kind of lucky, because I first put together about a 30-minute presentation, and Kevin said, enough, 10 to 15 tops. So,
You'd have to bring a check.
yeah, to get that much more airtime, definitely. But, so we are going to kind of just hit the highlights. There is the report that's on your website, and it's going to be very informal. Stop me if you have questions, or we can address anything at the end. And so with that, we'll get moving. All right, it's working perfect. So there actually is adopted legislation from the state of North Carolina that guides these fees and how they work and what they're for. So we'll run through this pretty quick. So basically, this House bill was adopted, and so what it did is that it actually kind of set the guidelines. So this is a fee that's only imposed on new development, and it's to fund those water and sewer improvements. They can fund other things as well, but we're focused on the water and sewer system. But it's basically, it's driven by the necessitation for that new development, the additional capacity that may be required, or the utilization of existing capacity that is not currently being used.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
And I think the question is more to our city attorney, because we had lawsuits involving system development fees in the past, did we not?
We did.
So I've had some questions about this and conversations about impact fees, because impact fees is another way of describing system development fees. That conversation did not end in my favor. So I was just hoping that we could be clear as to what's allowed and what's not allowed, because, obviously pursuant to the statute and what we're saying here, certain system development fees are allowed, but I also know we settled a lawsuit about
The lawsuit was based on a court case, and after the court case ruling, then cities, there was actually a different result for between city and county, but cities were not allowed to charge these fees. But the state law statutory system was changed after that to allow for that. And then we've had consultants, this is now the second generation, come forward and present a system that would be allowable. Is that consistent with what you're
That is.
ready to present?
And
Yeah,
what was
that's
the
exactly.
problem that led to the lawsuit under the previous regime?
Statutory interpretation of one word, and I'm not, that's been 6 years, I can't remember exactly the word, but it was a very technical issue where the court said this enabling legislation that the General Assembly passed in the state statute did not allow cities to charge these fees.
That's exactly right. It specifically said counties and water authorities and that type of thing. It just left out the word cities.
So it's one of those laughing principles, like if you list all these things, then you didn't include the other, that must mean you didn't, all right.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And so that's probably, and I wasn't working with you guys then, but that's probably where the legal action was on that part, not on moving forward with the fees that were adopted after the legislation. I would expect.
That's correct.
So I'm saying that after this latest legislation, that whether it's an impact fee for water and sewer or some other expenditure, that those are by statute now allowable?
Yes, sir.
These system development fees are allowable, provided you go through the analysis that the consultants are going to present and adopt that. Now, the first generation resulted in a lowering of our fees.
Okay.
Now, I'm not sure what yours is going to show, but the one 5 years
Little
ago,
higher.
pardon?
A little higher.
A little higher, okay. So that was our experience. Two things we did: we settled all the lawsuits where they said you couldn't do it, got rid of them, and then we adopted a new system based on the analysis that his predecessor did, and now we're in the second generation of that analysis update. Right?
That's exactly right. Yes, sir. So with that, and that's a great question though, because you do want to make sure moving forward what you're doing is legally defensible, and so that's kind of where we come in, and obviously your legal counsel as well. So the adoption process that is part of the state law, there has to be a fee analysis prepared by a financial professional. That's us, and so that's been done. So we've got to employ generally accepted accounting and engineering principles, which of course we do that. But this is all, here again, right out of law. We have to follow this process. We have to look at the CIP, that's a capital improvement program. We have to look at least a 5-year planning period, but no more than 20 years. I believe this study, I believe, was a 10-year planning period. It's got to be posted for 45 days on your website, which we're just within a few days of that. And so at the next meeting, you'll be beyond that 45-day period, so you can then act on those fees, which would require the public hearing. So so after the public hearing, if there are any changes, we've never seen anybody come forward and say this needs to change or you did this wrong or anything. So there won't likely be any modifications. And then you adopt it by resolution or ordinance, and then in 5 years we do it again. But it has to be done at least every 5 years. That's part of the state law too. If by chance something changes where your capital program is double or triple what you had expected, and you say 2 years, 3 years from now, and you say, well, we need to address it sooner. You can address it sooner, just not past the 5 years. So the methodology, the methodology is kind of somewhat a little more vague in the legislation, but the methodology that they kind of address is consistent with American Water Works Association. So we follow their methodology. It's industry standard, legally defensible, so it's kind of keeps everything in check. So there's three methods. There's the buy-in method that looks at the existing assets and recovering the cost of the capacity for those facilities. Incremental and marginal cost method, which looks at the CIP, that capital program, and any additional capacity that may be generated from that and the cost. And then a combined method, which we've worked with your staff and kind of determined, we looked at the different options and determined the combined method is the selected method for this analysis, which is the most common as well. That's typically what we're looking at. So what we're really trying to identify is the cost per gallon of capacity. So we've got to first identify our recoverable costs. So our recoverable costs are, here again, the buy-in method is the top, the existing facilities. Then we've got the capital program, which is the incremental cost method, and then we combine those, and so we've got a recoverable cost. And here again, that's kind of what the report addresses, that's what the analysis shows. We won't go into all that detail here. But then once we identify those combined recoverable costs, and we break them into treatment and transmission, I'll explain that here in a little bit. But primarily, treatment facilities and transmission facilities, the capacities are not equal, so we make some adjustments. You can see in the middle where it says less combined credits, the legislation requires a credit for the debt service, any outstanding debt, with the thought being that if you have outstanding debt on some of your existing assets, that debt is being funded in your monthly user rates. So we don't want to double recover. So we've got that. Then there's also the legislation requires a 25% capital improvement program credit. So that's in there. So those are the combined credits. And so then we've got our net recoverable costs. So we know what we're looking to recover.
Why is there a 25% capital improvement plan credit?
Because the state says so. It's got to be at least 25%, so we stuck with it.
Well, what's the theory as to why it's such a credit?
I don't know if they have a theory, or, I mean, my thought was kind of the same thing with the debt service, is they want to, the debt service credit, they want to make sure there's not an over-recovery or a double recovery. That would be my only thought. But it doesn't say in the verbiage as to why that is.
Convenient.
So it's arbitrary.
A number like that, though.
So here's kind of what it looks like. We've got our existing assets, our CIP, we combine those. We've got our total recovery. We back out the debt service credit and the 25% CIP credit. And so we've got our net recoverable facility costs. And so now we move forward with that. Start with our net costs again. And we have those separated between treatment and transmission. So we look at the treatment first. So we divide the treatment cost by the treatment capacity. And ultimately, we're going to have a cost per gallon of capacity for the treatment. We do the same thing with the transmission cost, transmission capacity, same exact math. So that's what this looks like. So it kind of breaks down. I can probably use a pointer here, maybe. No, it doesn't show up on the screen. So we take those costs and then we say, okay, we've got our cost per unit of capacity. How much capacity are we basically selling? So that's where we come in with the system development fee, SDF per ERU. ERU standing for equivalent residential unit, a typical household.
3-bedroom?
Typical 3-bedroom house, yes, sir. So we've got our cost per gallon, and we've got our level of service. This is how much service we're selling. This is what we're defining as an ERU. 360 gallons per day for water, which is, here again, a typical 3-bedroom house. And that's what you've already got adopted. So we've got our SDF per ERU for water. Do the same thing on sewer. And on sewer, you've got the state-approved 80 gallons per day per bedroom. Here again, we've assumed 3 bedrooms, so 80 times 3 being the 240. Do the math again. So we've got our cost per gallon of capacity, and then, we've got our cost, our total SDF per ERU, and that's what this looks like. So we've got your existing column, and you can see that combined, a little over $1,800. We've got our calculated, which is also what we're proposing. Now, you don't have to go with the calculated or proposed number. You can do anything that amount or less. So, but we're proposing that you recover your costs to the extent that you can. So in total, it would be an increase of about $2,100 per year. And then here's what that would look like for larger connection sizes. You can see that second column says meter factor. I mentioned earlier that we do this based on American Waterworks Association standards, and that's where those meter factors come from. It's right out of the manuals. And so that just, all that says is whatever the 5/8 inch or 3/4 inch number is, you multiply that times 2.5 for the next meter size, times 5 for the next meter size, and so forth.
Sorry, question, because as I understand the presentation, that's not what we're currently doing, that we have our current calculations based on your ERU, which is a 3-bedroom house, and then we have a big list of all these other things, because obviously not everything's a 3-bedroom house. Well, what if it's 4 bedrooms, what if it's 5, what if it's a barber shop, what if it's a bakery, what if it's, there's this whole list. And you recommend that we go to meter size instead, as to both water and wastewater,
Right.
Based on standard in the industry. So my question is then, if the different types of dwelling units or the different types of units, they have different size connections. So if a standard 3-bedroom is 5/8 by 3/4, if we've got a 4-bedroom, that means the meter size is going to be higher?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No, they might have the same meter size. So and what you're doing now is not wrong. We just, in fact, we did the analysis both ways, the way you're currently doing it and under this. This is just a little easier for your staff. They don't have to like figure out what everybody's doing. You don't have to look on the other side of the fence.
My only concern, I mean, and you all know better, we're not missing anything by doing it this way, are we? Like, we're not capturing something that we could otherwise capture.
If you, what your, I think what your ordinance should allow is if your engineers think that doing it this way for a particular new business coming in is not appropriate, then do it the other way.
Based on business classification?
Either that or just sort of based on the flow that you know they're gonna use. And you saw we came up, with the cost per gallon of capacity. So if their gallonage number, they have to give you that, you can still use this information to do the same math.
So are we allowed to flip back and forth between it? Because I was reading something over the weekend, it said something about it has to be applied consistently.
Which it would be for,
So
yeah.
it would be okay though to switch the scheduling, the fee scheduling,
Yeah.
depending on what yielded the city the most money in?
Yeah, because somebody might come to you and say, well, I need a 4-inch meter for fire purposes, but I'm not going to use that much. You might make an adjustment for them. But like consistently, you'd still charge them the same dollar per gallon capacity.
Okay, I see. It's just how it's measured, the
Yes.
actual water. Okay, I got you.
And the meter size is gonna be driven by like building code.
Typically.
Mm-hmm.
And all this is saying is, okay, we've got a method that's, here again, consistent with industry standards, and it treats everybody the same. If you're a 1-inch meter, everybody pays the same, because you are basically, your system has to provide that capacity for that meter size, regardless of what's on the other side of it. If it's a house, if it's a restaurant, whatever.
Right.
So the minimum duration, you were saying at the outset, between these reviews is 5 years, maximum is 20?
No, the planning period is 5 to 20. The fees have to be reviewed every 5 years.
So, I mean, just with what we've seen with inflation in the last 18 to 24 months, if you look out, say, over the next 3 to 4 years, and we continue this pace of inflation, we're still going to be basing that per unit fee on today's costs.
You would, yeah.
And I don't suppose there's any way around that, is there?
Well,
Is there any sort of inflation factor that could be applied?
we did put some inflation on the capital projects. I think we assumed 3% a year. Pretty conservative. As I was saying earlier, if all of a sudden you look out, like you get out 3 years from now and say, well, we're not recovering enough because our capital costs are so different than what we thought they were going to be, then don't wait 5 years, redo it in 3.
And we have that plan.
Yeah. I think the intent of the 5-year review is so that somebody doesn't just put these things in place and they don't look at them again for 20 years. So I think that's really the purpose.
One last question, I hope this doesn't display my ignorance, but who exactly pays these fees? Because certainly the lawsuits are brought by the developers. So who, when we assess these system development fees, who, as a practical matter, pays them?
Well, typically the developer, but you could, if it's a new business, a new restaurant coming in, and they're, maybe there's already a building, but they're having to increase the connection size, then they would pay their own. But typically, if you're looking at residential new development, the developer will typically pay that.
Or pass it on.
But they pass it on, of course.
And again, is that applied, you might get into this, but one of my notes I had, is that applied to, let's say, an infill, the same for an infill developer all the way to like a large scale developer? It's applied to both instances? Okay.
Yeah, should be. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all.
Thanks very much.
All right. And of course, if you come up with questions after, let Kevin or somebody know, and they'll get in touch with me.
So we will have the public hearing for this at our November 20th meeting. Correct. Okay.
And you won't need me for that. Because you guys understand it now.
Or you bring us a check.
Yeah, I'll bring a check next time.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the Keener Boulevard Memorial Sign discussion.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of council. I put this on the agenda given that, during the October 2nd city council meeting during other business, Councilman Rumfeld distributed a rendering of a potential Keener Boulevard memorial sign to honor Robert Stephen Keener. He was a U.S. Army soldier who was killed in action during the Vietnam War. And I know that was important to, just from your comments, so I wanted to get full feedback from everybody for the direction for staff to take. I did look into the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, their application process to it's the state marker program for certain signs, and just by reading through it, it didn't feel like it was it would qualify for this designation for a historical marker. And that also included the actual signs in Gaston County that were approved and have been installed throughout Gaston County. I also considered the state's road designation program. Keener's already designated as Keener Boulevard through the state program, so that NCDOT may install a sign, but it would not have all the detail and things that Councilman Rumfeld had actually put his rendering. And so I feel like it's more of a city-led project this time, that it seems it would be created internally, some kind of rendering with a sign company, with that rendering to come back to you all for approval, possibly for a budget amendment. We also have to consider the actual location where the sign needs to be placed. If it's on private property, then I'd work with city attorney at that time to consider like an easement potentially, and let the city maintain the sign and maintain the actual easement area. So the actual sign placement and the sign designation, just wanted your all's feedback to see if that's something we would take on, and then if so, then I'll direct staff to move forward.
I think we definitely do. I mentioned this probably a year or more ago, and we have a very active group of people who are in that graduating class. Marty Barnes, Ginger Easter, my husband, and a number of Doyle Wilkins. So I think at some point we need to, just as a courtesy, let them look at what we're talking about, because this is already one of their classmates.
As I understand, my dad was a classmate as well. As I understand, I have to confirm confirm this, I think he was the first soldier from Belmont that was killed in Vietnam.
That's
It's not-
correct.
So,
That's what I've heard, and that was before my time.
I agree with Martha and Jason on this, obviously, to do this. Just two quick things. Just one, I mean, we've done this with Historic Belmont Foundation by putting historic district signs up, granted that was a 50-50 partnership. So we've done this before. But why can't we do this, two more things really, why can't we do this in like the right of way for like NCDOT? Are we allowed to use, because that's what we did with the historic district designation signs.
We could, we just have to design the actual, signs based on their standards.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can do it, but
I
you
see.
still play by DOT's rules.
I see.
They own a piece of property right there on Cuba,
We do. It's the little yellow building back there. Yeah, that would probably be,
That would be a good site.
well, the fire department is also right there off of Keener Boulevard as well. So we've got a couple of different ones. Only question, this is more towards council. I mean, we're kind of coming right up to it, but I mean, should this be something we do a budget amendment on or something we just wait until the next budget cycle?
Well, let me ask you, based on your experience, how much the previous signs?
$5,000, $6,000. So it's not much. I believe the last one we did, the city did like $3,000 and HBF did $3,000 or something like that. So they're not much. But again, that was just a sign that said Historic Belmont Foundation, or excuse me, the Belmont Historic District. If we're getting into like the description and things like that, which we should, to tell the story, that could potentially cost more, right? I don't know.
Well, I mean, one thing to think about is whether we want like the design and fonts and stuff like that to match these other signs that we shot up. Like, do you want to have a bunch of these like historic markers? Might be good to
Yeah,
have
that's a good
consistent.
point.
you know,
Yeah.
and I'm not opposed to partnering with the Historic Preservation Society.
Well, no, not partnering, but I'm just saying, I use them as an example, like,
Yeah.
we have done this before.
Because it was also mentioned as far as the maintenance, if we go forward with this, the maintenance of going forward, you know, we can maybe partner with like American Legion, the VFW, you know, they were probably, help with that.
But they're not much, to answer your question. I just don't know how much.
I mean, it's not much, I mean, I would be okay with a budget amendment rather than pushing off to the next budget.
So that's fine, I just read that that's one of the directions Mom was looking for, so.
What do you need from us, a motion to?
I think I've got it, so let's
Yeah,
direct
I think
staff to
it's-
bring back the location and, bring back the cost of the sign. And then, move forward with the budget at that time.
Who's gonna handle the design of the sign?
Who did it for the historic markers?
I don't know. Yeah.
I can inquire too with the gentleman that suggested this, he's probably got some other examples that we've seen, that we have, and that we identified,
Yeah.
specializes in this.
Tiffany, did staff work on,
Yeah, she is. Tiffany?
didn't the staff work with the historic Belmont sign, didn't Melissa work with them on the sign?
She did.
Yeah.
But was it, did we bring the design, or did the city do the design? I don't remember.
I would have to research that. Melissa was our point of contact, so I don't want to speak on her behalf without digging in a little bit. I do know that, just wanted to check on the sign ordinances. I know you guys were talking about location. So typically, we try to discourage sign placement within the right-of-way just because of blocking visibility, but it is an option. And the city is allowed to give ourselves permission to locate it there if we don't find another alternative. But a lot of times on signage, other than governmental signage, we try to prohibit that within the right of way. So this is a little bit different. It's government, you guys are working on it, and city has to give permission. I just wanted to make sure that you guys knowing that, and then I would have to research the signage for the historic preservation, and get back on the details of that.
I view this as an exception, right? I mean, if you go and drive, it's always in the right of ways where you have those little historical markers. If you go and look at the Historical Society over there, with Chronicle, Lone Chronicle, you've got, and I think this would be an exception.
Sure. I will.
So, you good on this?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Next item is approval of edits to the traffic
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to grab that quicker from you, Jamie, if you still have it. Thank you. So I've got a real brief presentation for you tonight. Staff was directed, and in partnership with Miles, Kevin, Jerry, and some other members of our team, we kind of got together and took the existing traffic calming policy, which was put in place in 2007, and did some edits to it, trying to change some of the language around to make it more easy to understand, because quite frankly, with the existing policy, even as staff, sometimes we're like, where does this start, where does this end? We wanted to make it a little bit more clear so we knew where we were going. So I've got several, you have a copy of the, of course, marked up copy from the existing policy, as well as a finalized, clean copy, and then a form copy for you to review. Some of the important changes we made is that we removed minimum width requirements on the streets, because at the end of the day, that didn't really seem applicable to us in most instances. Even though it existed prior, we think that was probably just adopted from a policy from another town. We removed the curb and gutter requirement, because we didn't see a need to require a curb and gutter if you have certain traffic calming devices. But also, if we were going to be putting a speed bump or something on a road without the curb and gutter, we would make sure, of course, that in the staff review that the engineering work, we're not going to put something in place to where it's going to cause a flood or anything. So it wasn't really applicable in this case. We did add a 1,000-foot street length requirement, just to make sure you have enough room and to put in the traffic calming devices. Anything shorter than that's going to be a short enough street where it probably is not going to be a concern. We reworded the speed study criteria to be clearer. Before, it talked about 85th percentile and stuff like that, which was, to me, kind of a statistical, worded in a very statistical way, which was hard to understand. So we reworded it to mean the same thing, just worded differently, that 15% of vehicles speeding greater than 5 miles per hour. We lowered the traffic volume threshold to 250 vehicles from 500. The thought there being that we wanted to capture as many streets as we could that would be applicable, because even if you've only got 250 vehicles going down the street, if they're all speeding, they're all speeding. So we still have a concern there. But we didn't want to go any lower than that, because then you're talking about streets that just don't have a lot of traffic, period. We made Public Works our first point of contact, and that again was one of the things missing from the previous policy. Is they talked a lot about the chief of police and the police department, but it didn't really guide who accepts these requests, who processes them. So staff decided it probably should start in Public Works, and that is standard of most other towns' policies that we saw. It starts in Public Works. They make sure the engineering works, gets with the city engineer, make sure everything makes sense, and then from there it goes to the police department when you're talking about speed studies. So we reframed the entire policy as more of a process and a procedure. That way it's kind of like a step-by-step guide. You go through the whole policy and procedure as it's laid out. And then we removed references to the Public Works Committee, because in the past few years, as you all know, the council hasn't really operated in a committee structure. We can always change that back if the council determines they want to go back to a committee structure. But in this case, staff would just make those recommendations and review and send them to the full council for consideration.
Bill, just real quick, I'm sure it has, but I just want to make sure to double check. Police department fine, chief, you're fine with all this, with the change and everything like that?
Yes, sir, I was involved in the whole process.
Okay, perfect. It wasn't stated, I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, we involved them and fire as well to make sure. And if you do look at the policy, we included, of course, with police, them conducting the speed study and then determining the traffic volume count, because you need to do that when they have their device or their stealth step device. We did at least a 48-hour period, although my understanding from the chief of police is that standard practice is maybe like a 5 to 7 day window. So you could potentially have more data, but we wanted to set a minimum there as well. But we didn't want to do an entire week minimum, because then there might be in circumstances where you wouldn't need that. And of course, the chief of police, at the end of the day, if we get through this all, and after the speed study, other law enforcement measures can be taken to prevent speeding, such as putting a vehicle out there, putting up a display sign. Then of course the chief of police would have the authority to say we can use other law enforcement means to accomplish the speed reduction. And of course there are still some criteria dealing with after the speed study done with petitions, making sure that the residents on the affected streets are involved in the process, involved in the sketch planning process, and there's several percentages and votes in there that didn't really change, but they kind of are the final step. And then once that gets back to the city, that would be when the sketch plan would be made, and it would be brought to the city council for review and discussion, and then eventually a vote to determine whether or not they would move forward with that. I did attach a policy or a form as well with this policy. That's going to help us track it. This is just an example. I don't know if we use this exact form, but we can use some of our technology, our IT technology form site to build this form virtually so that people can request it online and it goes through the right proper workflows to be considered. And I put the policy up here just for the public's consumption. I know it's a little small, but it's kind of hard to fit the whole policy on a few slides. But of course, if anybody needs a copy, it's on the website attached to the agenda if anybody would like to review it, or if anybody wants a fresh copy, I'd be happy to provide it to them as well. So with that, that's my presentation. I welcome any questions, discussion. Again, this is a starting point for us. We certainly aren't saying this is the final stop for this policy. We think it's a good starting point to start seeing if this is going to work, if this process works. Obviously, with anything, there may be some changes we have to modify as we go along, but you all are the ones who talk to the residents and know the concerns for the residents when it comes to speed bump requests, so we certainly want to make sure you all are involved in that discussion.
Thank you for doing this, Bill, and everybody else who is involved with it. This is definitely a hot button issue for folks in the community, and I know it was for me when I lived across the street too. It's like you get frustrated, but you also need to provide data and understand the data too when it comes to it. So.
Two
Yes, sir.
comments, I guess, or questions. If you look at section 3A, it refers, I think the wording is a little bit clunky there, where it says 15% of vehicles speed more than 5 miles an hour. I think that's vague and ambiguous. I think, a lawyer could say, well, if 15% of vehicles are traveling more than 5 miles an hour, then you get the policy invoked. I would change it to 15% of vehicles are recorded traveling at a speed more than 5 miles an hour over the posted speed limit.
Is it speeding in excess of 5 miles an hour?
More than, that's how they kept that, yes. So that was just one thing, so I think that sort of tightens up that language a little bit.
That's fine.
The other thing is section 4A that talks about the percentage of residents signing the petition, and it says the entire street. There are some longer streets, so I was wondering about that, where you have a longer street that might go through different neighborhoods, and maybe it's only a portion of the street that's causing problems, or where the hot button issue is, but then you need to get 75% or whatever of all owners on the street, including maybe people who are not in the affected area. Like I think Poplar Street itself, if I understand, was originally one street, and then it was sort of opened up into another neighborhood. Would those people in that other neighborhood then be included among the petition signers, and they might not be as invested in that issue as the people in the segment where it's
should be
a big problem? So I don't want.
Yeah, because if you think of my neighborhood, if you were to put a speed bump on Cathedral Drive, you'd have to get signatures from every single person in the neighborhood. Because that's one road that goes to the whole neighborhood, and it's all cul-de-sacs off of it.
It looks like Dory, where you guys are, stretches from Penso over to.
Yeah.
So even if you wanted to put a speed bump all the way at the back of the neighborhood, everyone would have to.
Right, or if the problem is Dory as it exists in Pinstow, and that's where they want to put the speed bumps, well, the people in Stowe Point might not care about that issue, because it's, all the speeders turn left onto Stowe Road.
Right. Can you do like a certain, I don't know what it would be, but a certain radius of like the area?
I would say if we would look at sections, we would probably want to be within a certain measurement of the devices to be installed.
That's a really good point, actually.
So I think the intent behind that is to prevent, even if you live at the end of a street and it's not going to be a speed bump in front of you, you may have to ride over it to get to your home. Or if you live on a cul-de-sac, although you may not live on the affected street, you need to go over it to get there. So certainly we can, on those longer stretches of road where we think that there's not going to be a problem in one area or the other, we could look into doing some sort of measurement designation of the street within a certain limit of the speed calming devices that be installed. But certainly, you want to add something?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is if you don't meet that 1,000-foot requirement by including the other part of the street that you're talking about, it may not meet the criteria to even go forward with a traffic calming anyways. That's something that's on clarify.
I had a question on section 4, a different part of it. So the way I'm reading it, in 4A, you've got to get 75% of the people on the street to sign it.
Sure.
And then that triggers the design process.
Correct.
And then once you have a design, you gotta go back and get
50%.
Right. So you basically have to get 2 petitions?
Yeah, so the point of that second step is to make sure that the community is okay, they're involved with the design process, and that we don't just throw out a design that, wasn't the intent of when they initially signed the petition. So it's making sure that at least a majority of the owners who have stake in the design process have some sort of say. And obviously, the HOA board is going to be easier.
Right.
If they don't have an HOA board, it's going to be more of a challenge. But that is the intent behind that part of the
And I don't remember which neighborhood it was, but I know one neighborhood requested this. And then when you looked at the design, the person whose house this was going to be in front of did not want that. So you have that kind of situation, so you do probably need to go back a second time.
I'm just wondering how onerous that would be, like, in a neighborhood that's unorganized.
Yeah.
It would be more of a challenge.
Yeah, because if you're just going to an HOA board, I don't see that being a problem. But if you were going to, I don't know, you go to speed bumps in Pebble Creek, having to go back twice to get signatures from people could be quite involved.
Yeah, but the problem is we wouldn't have the internal resources to manage that, right?
Not currently. If we want to go knock on doors, that'd be a challenge. I think the goal of it is to make sure the community is bought in, right, and that they're involved. But I understand the concern, because that would be a challenge, but I think realistically, if you don't go through that step, what's going to happen is you're going to approve speed calming devices or traffic calming devices, and then they're going to say, no, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
And then they're going to come back and say, you got to take those out. So you want to make sure you go through the right process and that everybody's bought in.
Because the only alternative is you go to them with a suggested solution, and it's take it or leave it, right? Because otherwise you don't allow time for a second phase of
Yeah, that's kind of where my mind was
getting
going.
feedback on.
Do we maybe just after the first petition, or maybe we design it and then have a petition?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. But then, they're not happy with the design that you proposed, then you kind of, you're back to square one with having to go back.
Yeah, and if you design before a petition, now all of a sudden you're stuck at a point where you don't even know if all the people on the street support it, and you're spending staff time and stuff on the design.
Could we handle it, I'm just thinking out loud, but could we handle it as almost like a rezoning process, where we have a public hearing, we mail out notifications to the affected property owners?
We would need to revise this policy a little
Right.
further.
Yeah.
That's not what most communities do. I don't know if there's precedent for that, there may be, but we would have to do some research if that's possible. I guess at the end of the day, we can manage it how the board wants to manage it. The hope was to kind of streamline it and make it as, I know it's not simple, but try to make it the process as smooth and as seamless as we can, so that at least residents have the capability of submitting these things and getting them for review.
So the dual petition process is kind of the model that you see most folks adopt.
It is. It is. I think Charlotte's is a little different, but they're such a large community. It's hard to do apples to apples. But they have an entire traffic engineering division that can kind of maintain some of that.
Scale helps.
Yeah. But yeah, this is standard language for most. And I will mention that even getting to the phase where you would get the petition going, you still have to make it through those engineering principles. So there's still a lot of work that's going in the front end before they get to that. So if you add on top of that doing the design and everything, it's going to be onerous probably on staff to get through all that and manage that process without getting investment from the community first. That's just my thought. that's my opinion.
I was just gonna say, I think what you've done here is streamline this and make it a little less onerous on the citizens to come forward. I mean, it's, you know, it may not be a perfect document, but I think it's a more workable one. And, you know, unintended consequences may pop up, but we can revise that.
Yeah, I mean, and the policy itself it's become a little less strict than some of we had some requirements in there we took out. But I think the big thing for the staff is just gonna be that we have a process, right, that we can follow. And I think it's gonna make it a lot easier for citizens to at least go through it. And I'm sure if we start, you know, processing a few of these and we notice some problems, then we'll of course recommend changes if we need to. Or if you hear from the citizens that, hey, this process doesn't work, or there's something going on here, we need to change, and of course we can take that feedback, adjust the policy as needed. We just haven't adjusted it in a
No,
long time.
yeah, this is a great start. It's definitely an improvement over what we had before. Yeah, but I'm just trying to think,
Sure.
you know, through how this would work.
Yeah, and certainly if you have some ideas that you want to throw out, just let me know, and we can look at that and see if there's some examples or some work we can do to word things.
Would it be possible to track, like, submissions that come through, and like how many of them make it through, like, each step of the process? Just to kind of like get an idea of how well it's
Yes.
working?
We could, given that we have this traffic calming request form, so it's a whole lot easier now to deal with that. This is an online form, so it's one of the, you submit it, if you need to do that, and we can track it forever.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, for the 4 years I've been on council, we've not had a single one come up to council for an up or down. So I'd just be kind of interested to see like how the process performs from that perspective. If it is actually easier for a request to make it through the whole process.
Yeah, and I will say, since I've been director, we've gotten a few like requests for them, but typically when we go to the speed study process, it doesn't ever get through it, at least traditionally. But there's only been a couple times, it's not been a lot. So I think with this, having the first point of contact, having a form, a process, we'll be able to track that a lot better.
Yeah, because I mean, to your point, if they're all dying at the speed study stage, that's a different sort of issue than like if they're getting through that and then not making it through the petition stage.
Correct. Since I've been around, I don't remember there ever being a petition stage either. I have heard of some residents go ahead and get started on the petition, and that was another thing that was unclear about the policy before, is that some people were just going straight to that point. Say, oh, I'll just get a petition, I can get, and I said, well, no, you got to get through everything else first. But I think, I honestly, in most cases, don't think that the petition stage is going to be the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is going to be making sure you meet the engineering principles and the speed study criteria, which, like we discussed, if we review the data, we look back and we say, well, nothing's getting past the speed study, well, maybe the speed study criteria is too strict, and we need to get with the chief of police and look at that.
Yeah.
Well, I think to Richard's point, if we're being asked to approve this today, I think, maybe we've got some things to think about and things that we could go down, but, I mean, would we rather just approve this today and have it in place and then work out the kinks as opposed to go back and like, well, let's flush these things out? I mean, that seems to be...
I think so. I mean, I think this is huge strides in the right direction. It's just, there's gonna be issues that pop up.
But I think it's better to have it in place than not.
I agree. I mean, there would be some unknowns.
Because are we gonna deviate too much from what is presented? Probably not, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we can clarify 3A and 4A. I think 3A language, we can adopt that pretty quickly.
Yes.
The 4A, the clarifying, the measurement, designation, I think that language is going to be a little more complicated. So I think we, as staff, might need to look at that, see how we can explain it when somebody's reading it. And so once those two items are hashed out, I'd recommend we bring it back through consent, put it on consent, let you all approve it at that point, which I imagine probably could be the next council meeting.
Yeah, we'll just make those small adjustments that Councilman Heffernan had made, and then look into this other petition scenario, see if there's something else we can grab onto, and I think that's a good path forward.
So no action on this, we needed it this time, we know.
table this item until the December 2023 regular meeting.
I'll second.
All those in favor? And last, but certainly not least, quarterly finance update. Actually, it's not the last one, I think it was, last thing for the public. Yeah,
It's not even the last in the public, so you want to do.
that's true. All right, well,
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Okay, so we'll just jump right in. So, I wish I was a little bigger, but this is very similar to the dashboards that I've been sending in once a month in the council updates, but wanted to dive in a little bit in deeper detail. First thing that we'll cover is revenue. I'll just talk about the groupings first. Ad valorem taxes includes our property taxes and vehicle taxes. Intergovernmental revenue includes local option sales tax, utility franchise tax, beer and wine tax, Powell bill, grant revenues, some of which are restricted, so like Powell bill is restricted for streets, but this includes restricted and unrestricted intergovernmental revenue. Other general fund revenues would include ABC board distributions, investment earnings, and recreation fees. And then the fund balance appropriation would be budget amendments that have been approved to date through September 30th. And transfer from ARPA would also be a part of a budget amendment that was approved to transfer money from ARPA to fund fire salaries. So if you look at the percentage of the year, ad valorem taxes is down 7%, but that is not a reason for concern because we are about to be in the peak window for us to start collecting property taxes. So you'll see that number swing significantly the other direction when I present again for the second quarter update. So no concerns there. Intergovernmental revenue is down 10%. Part of this is due to us booking a very conservative number for our sales tax, but it has been coming in very strong. Collections for, collections for July were $464,000 and August was $450,000. We typically book about a $100,000 receivable on the conservative end, just for the volatility of this. But based on our budget, we need to be bringing in approximately $372,000 per month to meet our budget. So we are well ahead as far as the budget is concerned there. These numbers will also be trued up as we get more live data and we true up that receivable number on the back end.
Well, that's good to hear, because I know there was some concern when we were going through the budget about how those sales tax numbers would hold up with the talk of recession and various other.
Correct, yeah, and actually as compared to last year, it's better than it was last year at this time, so. Yeah, so coming in really strong there. The other driver there for other general fund revenue is going to be, as you can see, it's a higher percentage, 55% as a percentage of the year. The main driver for that is going to be our interest on investments. We've done some really strong strategic work in our cash management of excess cash. And with today's interest rate climate, we've really been able to maximize on investment earnings in our term accounts. We've actually transferred a little bit more money into those accounts, so we budgeted for approximately $16,000 on interest on investments, and we've already collected $172,000 on interest on investments. So we'll continue moving money around and try to maximize the earnings as those interest rates stay high. Next, we'll talk about any questions on the general fund before I move on to water sewer. Okay, water sewer fund, the classes are for charges for services, which would include our water and sewer fees. Other operating revenues, which would include those interest on investments, lease proceeds, and any fund balance appropriations. And then non-recurring revenue is interest on investments. Excuse me, that's where that 2268. A large portion of our portfolio is in our general fund for the investments. As you can see, the $600,000 fund balance appropriation would just be what was passed as a budget amendment for the river mist reimbursement, so I included that there. Any additional fund balance appropriations would also be included in future updates. As you can see, as a percentage of the year, everything looks okay there. We're actually heading collections as a percentage of the year, 73% as opposed to 75%, so everything looks to be in good shape. The other non-operating revenues also, or excuse me, the non-recurring revenues also includes a fund balance appropriation to balance last year's budget, which we will do that. I will make a journal entry at year end if needed to move fund balance. So if, let's say our collections for revenue and water sewer sales are above what's projected and we don't need to tap into that $1 million fund balance appropriation that we use to balance the budget, I'll make that assessment at that time at the end of the year. So that's why that, you're seeing the 1.1 million there, but 1 million of that I've not journaled into our general ledger yet. Any questions on water sewer? Okay, and stormwater fees, our stormwater fund is in good shape as a percentage of the year. Collections are right on point with our budget. Any questions on stormwater? Next, we'll take a look at expenses. We are operating under budget as a percentage of the year in most departments. I think our department heads have done a really good job of managing their budgets. I don't really have any items of note on the expense side, other than what you guys have seen in your council update, so I will leave it up for any questions if you have any.
It's just, expenses today are outpacing revenues because of the timing that you mentioned earlier right now.
That's correct.
Once we start claiming and receiving the property taxes, that the pendulum's gonna swing pretty heavily on.
Correct, yep, and then as we go into the spring, you'll see that dip back down, and as we get closer to the year, the revenues, expenses are gonna get really close down to.
Yeah, because it's always one time big hit, and
That's
then
right.
it just starts like.
Yeah, so it's all about cash flow,
Yeah.
especially in the general fund.
Yeah, but no concerns, I mean,
No.
it is what it is.
Yeah, if we even look at last year, we were at, similar ballpark percentages both on the expense side and the revenue side. We're about 85% on the collection side on the revenue, and then 77%, 75% on the expense side. So as far as a percent of the year, as we're making pace through the year, we're right on track.
There's a note 6 in water sewer, but there's no corresponding note to it. Is that supposed to be?
That looks like a water sewer note.
Debt service?
How long is the expense now?
Yeah, on the expense.
You mean on the revenue side?
No, on the expense,
Debt
there's like a red
service.
6, but there's no
For the debt
corresponding
service?
note.
Underwater?
That should be a debt service. There's not been any, it might be cut off on the bottom there. What that is, we've not remitted any debt service payments to year. The first ones are scheduled for October, and more in November. This is through September 30th.
Any other questions?
No, looks good, I appreciate this, this is very helpful information.
We'll jump in, we can talk about water sewer fund as well. Expenses are in line with the percentage of the year. I guess you guys already seen the debt service there, but we will be using up the debt service budget there throughout the year. And stormwater as well, in very good shape as far as revenue to expense ratio. We usually do really well in stormwater. Any questions? I did want to close and just highlight a few items that we're going to be working on this year. Been meeting with Miles about several of these items, but we'd really like to develop a comprehensive fiscal policy to include, but not limited to, a grant policy to assess grant against adopted plans versus simply just adding dollars to our budget. So we really want to be strategic in grants and how we're going out for those. I actually had a meeting with North Carolina League of Municipalities, and they are offering free services through their ARPA funding, which would include grant writing. I know that came up one of the workshop or the prior council meeting, so we'd really like to take advantage of those services. Those are due to expire at the same time that our ARPA funds are going to expire, so we basically only have about another year or two to maximize on that, but we definitely want to take advantage of that. Would also like to address a fund balance policy to determine what our target minimum for unassigned fund balance should be. And this will also be coordinated with you, so it'll be presented and adopted by you. So certainly we'll put some parameters in place, but that will be open to discussion to what the council would like to see there. And then also a debt policy to include something like what's our minimum debt service coverage ratio, which that's just the measurement of how the city is able to pay its debts with its revenue and cash flow.
Do we have something that, didn't Ryan bring up?
It's
to
a
the table?
ratio, I think, of debt payments to revenue.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that we can do with that, but those are just some things that we're gonna be working on over the next few months, and certainly bringing those to your.
And are those recommended by Martin Stearns as well for the audits and for the controls?
It does help, it helps bolsters our controls. They have not specifically recommended that, but, we always want to be going above and beyond, especially on the control side. And a lot of these recommendations are also coming, not just from myself, but our city manager, and trying to bolster our finance department and get things on the right track.
Good stuff.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
All right, other business. We'll start with Jason. If you're ready. Okay.
Just a few items. This came up, I think, Miles, you and I talked about this a week or so ago, and I think it's probably already been addressed. I just want to make sure of that. The bed maintenance, especially for downtown with their flower bed maintenance along the Main Street corridor. I think some of the business owners have said that they were really surprised to see the street closed for early morning to, I was through there about 9 o'clock that night, and the cones were still out, so there was no on-street parking for anyone that day. So, a lot of businesses felt like we kind of got blindsided by that and didn't have advance notice, because some of them just said, we could just close for the day. But I think we talked about maybe talking with the landscaper to see if maybe that could be done on a Sunday or non-peak hours. Or...
It could be, my suggestion was that we had to put that out to the contractor to know that he could plant on Sundays, because he might charge a premium to come out and do that on a Sunday, for example. So whatever that bid is we currently have in-house, we probably have to go back and amend the contract to state that. And so I think we plant 2 times a year. And so we've got the fall plantings in, spring will be coming up, we'll make sure that that is included in the next price.
Yeah, thank you. Second thing is Boo Fest. Congratulations to you guys, Phil. I think that was a huge success. Sounds like you had a record crowd this year. Heard really good reviews from that. I was out over the weekend through Adams Bluff and heard from some of the residents there, and as you guys probably all know, that they get a lot of cut-through traffic, along 6th Street coming from 74 into kind of skirt around the Park Street interchange there and 74. If you've been down there lately, those speed bumps are really in bad disrepair. They're kind of disintegrating, the stripes are pretty much worn off, and they have a lot of puddling issues too, and they say especially when it rains, and you can't see that when it's not raining a lot of times, you can't see where those speed bumps are, but especially when it rains, you really can't see it at all. So I don't know if it's possible to maybe, visit out there and see what can be done in terms of, what was the term we talked about?
It needs to be recrowned.
Recrowned and restriped. Because one of the things they're really worried about is, if anything eventually happens too with like even prior to anything happening at Crescent, right now with the opening of the apartment complex behind Walgreens and some of the restrictions on the entries and exits from that, you can only go right pretty much onto Park Street on that side of the complex, and there's only exit going east on 74. So if you're at that apartment complex and want to go to Harris Teeter, they feel like all that traffic is going to be coming right down 6th Street. So I think those numbers are going to just only increase. So I think that's, an artery that needs some attention. And then lastly, I know we got an email back from Mr. Guffey with NCDOT about the traffic signal analysis. I needed some help interpreting that. I know the engineers speak, but do you guys recall, I think the Park Street interchange in 74 was the first one that they had studied. Is that complete now? Do we have any definitive results from that to say that the issue's been rectified there? I think there were some software issues. What do you recall about that?
What I recall is Guffey said that they had the best guy in the state coming out from like Raleigh to investigate the inner workings of that device. Now, whether that's complete yet, I don't really know if they consider that study like complete this time. I couldn't speak for them, but I know that they had the person out there who was adjusting it. But I don't know the outcome of it. I can check.
Because behind that intersection, I think the next one maybe in line that a lot of people are kind of screaming about is right up the hill at NC7 in 74, and then you know, we have some other ones that I think maybe need some attention, but I think those are the two that kind of hear about most often. So we'd love to get some priority on that from them, but maybe we can talk to them and go over there next time too with the transportation committee. That's all I have.
Marla?
Only one for me, Bill, if you would check, the parking lot beside the railroad track and just make sure if we have potholes, if we're on those, because I know they keep coming up, so if you check on that, that's only been really.
Richard?
Just to chime in, Boo Fest was a success. I think everybody, it was a huge crowd. Looked like everybody enjoyed it. For Mark Seelander, I would just say Mark really stepped up in a big way for Pebble Creek. I really appreciate that. I went out to that event and I was surprised how big that is. Dennis Boy said that by his count, he was using a clicker last year, had 660 kids come through. And I think they exceeded that this year. So it had been a long time since I've been there, since my kids were small. And it has definitely grown. I guess the public works, I would say the cemetery is looking much better. We've gotten a lot of compliments on that. Things have been trimmed up, and it looks like the folks cutting the grass are being a little bit more mindful now. So people have commented on that and they're pleased with that. And that's all I have.
Just a couple things. Did we solve the mystery of the foul smell in Morgan's Branch that was brought up at our last meeting?
I don't think that it's a mystery.
Was it a mystery?
So I did respond to the gentleman, who's, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I did respond to him, and laid out a couple of the steps that we were taking to help, mitigate the smell. And as I said before, unfortunately, for that community, this area is a regional lift station for the entire South Belmont. So, all the wastewater comes into that lift station, as you can ask, as Jerry can attest to as well. So we sent crews out, we did some additional flushing, we did some additional we upped some of our chemicals at the lift stations to help reduce odor. Ultimately, I think this is kind of, it always tends to happen right when the temperatures start shifting either to cold or to heat. So in fall and spring is when our complaints rise up, and they typically tamper down after a couple weeks. So I drove through there a couple times. Initially, I did smell it. I went through there last week and I didn't. Doesn't mean it's still not going on, but I haven't heard any additional complaints, and we took those steps to try to mitigate it to the best of our abilities. But ultimately, it's a regional lift station with wastewater, so it's going to be kind of an ongoing challenge going forward.
Are those additional treatments something you anticipate kind of doing perpetually, or just kind of a preventative?
We have already do that at those lift stations down south, since there's so much force main in between them. We just up the rate of that a little bit, so it's something we're going to continue as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And while you're up there, I just want to thank you, Bill, for all of your work over the last few years. And you've done a great job for us, and you've always been responsive when there's issues and sticky situations, and
Even the smelly ones.
even the smelly ones. It's true. But no, you've done a great job, and we wish you the best of luck in the new position in Drexel.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much.
Thank you.
The rec center, with respect to that, I would like to get perhaps some insight into the finances more frequently. I know when we were setting the fees, we said, well, we might need to modify them from time to time. We don't know whether they're appropriate. They're our best, best guess or whatever. I just feel like down the road, I don't want an unpleasant surprise that, oh, hey, here's a financial outlook for the rec center, and what, so I'd really like to get some, I guess, more frequent insight into some of the numbers so that we can decide whether the various fees we've set are appropriate, whether we might need to increase them, I suppose, whether we need to decrease them, but I just don't want, that to be something like, whoa, there's a big shortfall or something because we didn't set the fees right, and I don't know how much real analysis went into setting those fees, so I'm just nervous about that, and I'd like
Pro
to,
forma statement.
you know,
Yeah, and if you guys need majority direction, I agree with Jim on this one, if we could get that.
Yeah, well, we got almost 6 months worth of data now, right?
I recall in the budget process that we were going to do like a mid-year review on those fees.
Yeah.
And so we have that on our list of things, topics to come up on future council meetings that we'll bring that one up to.
so I don't want whoever is there to have an unpleasant surprise. Which leads me just to my last point, which is to wish all the candidates good luck tomorrow. And this will be our last regular meeting as this council, and so there's going to be changes regardless, but it's, pleasure working with you all, and we'll see what happens, but I think we did a lot of good work together.
Alex?
Just two things, and it is for Bill actually, and maybe Miles. Are we okay, I guess, with our water intake right now with us being in the stage 1 drought? Because I have noticed the Catawba River and South Fork are quite low.
Yeah, there's a couple boats sitting in the mud.
There's a couple of boats sitting in the mud.
Grounded vessels out there. Yeah, so we did enter stage 1 drought. We kind of skipped over stage 0 together, which we're in stage 0 for a long time over the winter, if you recall. Stage 0 is pretty much just, okay, let's see what happens. And we ended up coming out of it, we got some rain, but we had just been very dry. Very, very dry. And I think, with lawn maintenance in the late summer, early fall, people irrigating a lot, which, people like to do. But with no rain, it's perpetuated, people using more and more water. So we're working on some social media posts and some informational stuff we'll be getting out on Facebook and sending to our Water Smart customers this week. So we can make sure we communicate that. Of course, everything in those guidelines is voluntary, so it's nothing, there's no enforcement measure behind it. It's just the city asking water users to conserve water when possible, don't run irrigation, don't fill a pool, use an inordinate amount of water in their daily lives. Luckily, we're getting out of the summertime, so hopefully water volume just decrease over normal time anyways. But yeah, certainly as you talk to people and communicate with your constituents and residents, just make sure you tell them, conserve water when possible. Maybe you hold off on washing the car or go to a car wash where they reclaim water. But we'll be putting out more information in the coming week, and hopefully we'll get some rain and we don't, further along, because once we get a little further in some of the stages, that's when we have some enforcement we have to start making to make sure people read water.
But right now, no issues with the plant or anything like that?
No, as far as operations of the plant, our intake is very, I don't know what the right term is. It's pretty close to the base of the water. I don't know what the proper way to describe it is. So right now we're fine. We've never had an issue in the past. So we'll continue to monitor that. Of course, if we have any challenges, we'll let you guys know. The good thing is the city is set up for emergency operations. We have interconnects with both Mount Holly in 2 locations and 2 Rivers Utilities as well. So if we did ever run into an issue where we needed access to water, something was wrong with our intake, we have those emergency preparation material in place.
And then just last question, this is for curiosity, does Duke Energy communicate with us in regard, like, are they actively talking to us about the situation?
Yeah, they send out the notices, the stage drought information, and they have a web link as well that will be forwarded. So yes, they manage the waterways on the Catawba River, so they make sure that when the dams operate and they let water go. Right now, the reason the water's getting so low is they're retaining that water further north for other municipalities and other areas, which is why downstream we start seeing the effect. So it affects the whole river.
Cool, I appreciate it, Bill. Only other thing that I wanted to bring up, similar to what Jim was saying, it's been obviously a pleasure serving with all of y'all. Obviously, I'm not on an election cycle, and I feel a little bit
with a smile.
safer over here, but obviously, I do want everyone to know that I'm wishing everyone good luck, and I'm excited to work with whoever the voters choose tomorrow. So, good luck, y'all. That's all I have.
The only thing I've got is on the North Belmont Halloween festivities. I talked to some of the people up there, and it seems like they are open to this idea of the city becoming formally involved in that event in some form or fashion.
For the Pebble Creek area?
Yes. because it's grown where, Richard indicated, we've got over 600 people.
600 kids.
600 kids, yes, that's true, that's not even counting their parents and other people. You know, I think something like that, an event that size, that is at the moment being largely coordinated by an ad hoc group of volunteers is probably something that would be a good idea for us to provide some logistical support to, and some public safety resources. It's an event that's been going on for, as I understand it, close to 30 years. And we've talked a long time about figuring out a way to provide some programming and support to the people up in North Belmont. This just seems like a ready-made situation for something like that. So I think if the council is supportive of doing that, whatever form that takes, I mean, I think it'd be a good idea to maybe have our staff open up a dialogue with the neighbors up there just to kind of figure out what that relationship needs to look like and what kind of support we can provide to them.
I agree.
I have no issue with that at all. I think, one of the things they're gonna consider is the precedent. You know, and, you know, for other large neighborhoods that had similar experiences or they wish to have one similar to maybe Pebble Creek, you know, does that put a strain on us at some point in the future to provide? But I have no objections to that at all. I think it's a valuable service to that part of the community that we could really help with.
We just make sure both chiefs are involved with it.
Well, yeah, and that would be I think my goal in sort of doing this is that we'd have, you know, our public safety experts involved in executing on this event so that, you know, it's safe for everybody, so. That's it. So, now we take the public out.
Yes, I may read these parts for me. I need to move to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143, 318, 11A3, to consult with the city attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege with respect to the cases of Bernadette Rositos as administrator of the estate of Gabriel Kane versus City of Mount Holly, City of Belmont, and West Mecklenburg Volunteer Fire Department Incorporated, and Jeffrey Scott Wilson versus City of Belmont, and pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 133, 318, 11A5, to instruct staff on the position to be taken in negotiating the price of new material terms in the contract for the acquisition of real property.